Hey, my beautiful bitches, it's me, Fiona St. James, and welcome to another episode of Fiona's Coffee Talks. And as always, I like to start off every day with a fresh, hot, black cup of coffee. Hold the cream! I'd love to. And of course, I think of my favorite quote of the century by Oscar Wilde, which says, life is too important to be taken seriously, so lighten up, folks. So today's topic is, drumroll please, retail time part 8. Yay! So, when we last left off, I was talking about Lady Gaga and I worked for that fragrance. So that happened, that was around 2012. And then it wasn't too long after that. And then I was kind of like freelancing here and there. And then finally come around 2015, I guess it was. Then there was a particular company I backtrack. It was before that. There was a particular company, Jean Patou. Now, Jean Patou came out like 100,000 years ago, like 1932, more like it smelled like 1832, and it was one of the first fragrances in France. Now, here's the whole thing with that: like fragrances way back when, like when fragrances first came out, everything smelled the same. All of the women's fragrances all smelled like old talc powder. It almost smelled like someone who like refused to shower, and then instead of like bathing themselves and using soap, they're like, oh, let me just do a fragrance and mask that smell. So if you take the combination of a dirty bitch that ain't showered, and then all of these ingredients that back then the notes were very like heavy and almost trying to give it this like powdery feel, but didn't really work. And the combination of all of them together, it was, I didn't like it. But again, it was an expensive fragrance. And what would happen is it had its following. And it was essentially like, how do I put this? How could I be politically correct about this? The demographic was definitely and very old or older Caucasian women who like still love that style of fragrance, which, the newer styles of fragrances are not that at all. I couldn't even imagine any new fragrance or a designer wanting to pay homage to that style of fragrances. It just was not appealing. I understand things happen during the times that they do, and I think during the times, way back 100 years ago, that was the style, and that's what people were used to smelling, and and then you kind of go with the norm. And frankly, if your choices are limited, you're going to go with what you're going to get. So fragrances back then were definitely on the heavier side, but it was almost like, let's come up with the strongest, most hideous thing to mask the fact that we don't want to shower. Because I'd always be like, okay, bitches, soap and water, right? It's not that complicated. Then spray a fragrance. Then maybe you wouldn't feel a need to have something that heavy to hide the fact that you haven't showered. So, but what really was great about working for them, what I actually loved about it, was that because it was this older demographic, Bloomingdale's on the Upper East Side, that tends to be like, a rich, white, older demographic. So I would always get all of these really nice elderly ladies who would come in, and they were really like, they were loyal to that fragrance. So, because, it was the kind of thing that when I first started representing it, like it was in the store, it didn't have any representation, and there were stock issues because no one was really wanting to buy it. So I was able to at least like take that and somehow like generate business. And I remember, you could go on like on our cash register where you could like, they had the loyalist program, so I was able to find customers that way. And then I was good about like keeping records of who bought what, and and then periodically calling them to see if they needed any refills. And then, but it was such an old school fragrance that the customers, they didn't want just like an eau de parfum. They wanted the actual pure perfume. And I remember the pure perfume was like $350 for like 1 ounce. But whenever I would get that in stock, they would always just send me like 10 at a time. I could sell them in like 2 phone calls, because then when they would see that I would have it, they'd be like, give me 5. And at $350 a bottle, I would make my day, I would make my week just by selling those. And then the couple of years that I was with them, what was great was because they didn't have representation and they had stock issues that first year or so, every day my numbers were up, because it's always this year versus last year. Well, when you're competing against numbers that were so low, and then suddenly you have someone pushing it and representing it, and I got the gift of gab, and it was difficult to get new customers. That line was very difficult to just stop anyone walking by and convince them that it smelled good. They also had another fragrance called 1000. And that one also, it had its following, and people that were loyal to it, God loved them, because, I shouldn't read the fragrance really. It's not necessarily my style, but I understand the appeal, and I understand that, people like what they like, and no judgment there. But I know, so then what ended up happening was also in the middle of that was, when I was then decided that I wasn't sure how much I was liking it anymore. And then it was 2015 that I wrote the first draft of my book. And so I was with them. So I took 2 months off and went to California and Denver the summer of 2015. And then what was great about them was when I came back, they still they held on to the job for me. Like they had someone just filling in for me. And then I came back that September, that was 2015. And then I was with them through like 2016. But then that was when I went back to Denver for like 3 months and completed the first draft of my book. And then actually when I came back like 4 months later, they didn't want me back. And I was like, good bitch, because I don't want you back either. And that was around 2016. So then, and I was fine with that. And then but I also knew at that point, like 2015 was when I had this surgery where, because I'd been suffering from chronic diverticulitis, they removed 8 inches of my large intestine, and that recovery was a nightmare. So then it was like, I finished with them, and then, and then I just realized that, I don't know how much I want to do this anymore. And so then fast forward, that was like 2016. So I lasted 1 more year. But that last year, I wasn't with them. And then I was freelancing for like different fragrances. And so it's funny how I kind of felt like I did full circle, because, I started off freelancing, but then for the majority of the 25 years, I was always managing a line, whether it was fragrances or skincare or cosmetics or resident makeup artist. But then that last year, I was back to like being at the freestanding outpost. And I was like, I'm getting too old for this shit. And then, it was already like 25 years. And it just occurred to me that I was not happy doing it anymore. And beyond that, above and beyond the like kind of like mentally not caring about it anymore, the bigger thing was that physically what it was doing to my body was not kind anymore. Like standing on those floors was not easy. And then I was starting to get the beginnings of sciatica. So then my back was like, what are you doing to me? And then also because I had just had that surgery, it's a known fact with that surgery, if you're walking around or being active, it's okay. But the worst thing is if you're standing stationary. So, and that last year being at the outpost, that's essentially what I did. So I even remember that last month, my last day I'll never forget was June 30th, or actually right before 4th of July weekend of 2017. And I remember that last month or two working and like practically being in tears the whole time, because I was like physically suffering, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. So, and then at that point was when I was like, you know what? I'm an actor. I get my massage clients. And although I was doing all 3 things and I was able to like have a nice combination of it all. And that's why I think I don't get bored of things, because I do more than just one thing. But then at that point I was like, no, they say never. But at that point I was like, I don't think I could ever do this again. And so then I officially stopped, and I hit like the 25-year mark. And I was like, that's a nice number to say I'm done. So, and I could say I would never go back to it. But the odd part is a couple of times since then, because it's been what, 7 years, I've had dreams where I wake up and, sometimes when you have a dream and you don't, for that first couple of seconds, you're like, wait, was I just dreaming, or it seems so real that you think it actually happened? And a couple of times I've dreamt where I've been back at the store, and then I will wake up and be like, wait a minute, what? And then it takes me a minute to realize that I've been dreaming, or in this case, the nightmare, because I can never imagine going back at this point. And, so this is the one time when people say to me, never say never. No, I can. And, I don't know that I could say that about anything else, but in terms of retail, I can. And it was, wonderful while it lasted. So for those of you who are thinking about working in retail, just, realize that, like, as much as you love it, there's always that pressure of this year versus last year. And then, you're only as good as your last sale. Like, me and my friends, we would always say retail is such a thankless job. And there is a truth to that. They love you when your numbers are up, but when they're down, suddenly, what are you doing? So, but I don't regret it. It was a wonderful 25 years of my life. I met a lot of people. I made lifelong friends. It enabled me to travel a lot because then, being out there and meeting people, you meet guys and, oh, come see me. Yeah, why not? So that part of it I loved. So, all right, guys, but this is the 8th and final episode. So the next series, which will start in 2 weeks, I couldn't think, like, what should I do next? As I've, like, hit all of the major parts of my life. Then I realized that in my travels as, like, Empress or doing drag or, like, being part of the leather community, who knew, right? I've attended a lot of events. So the next 8-part series is going to be about, like, my top 8 events that I've been to, like, throughout the nation or internationally. So that will be a lot of fun. So make sure you tune in for that series too. But all right, guys, don't forget, thumbs up, subscribe if you have not. Again, you can read it all in my book, The Life and Crimes of Fiona St. James. The Saint is not spelled. I'm sorry. You could get the book at FionaSt.James.com. Saint is not spelled out. It's ST with no period after it. And you could read all about everything that I talk about, including my 25 years in doing retail. So, all right, guys, thanks so much. Love you and looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.